Kind greetings and welcome to the July 23rd, 2020 live broadcast of Triumphant Thursdays with Chaplain PJ. Our purpose is to bring consciousness on various subjects that impact and intersect with global peoples. Our goal is that you will be empowered to answer the call, and it is a calling to action, thereby having an opportunity to experience your own triumphant Thursdays. Our subject tonight is a continuation from 2 weeks ago. I survived domestic violence. I anticipate another fantastic evening with our guest, the Reverend Dr. Crystal Denise Walker, author of Silence is No Longer an Option, a pastoral response to domestic violence. She is also co-pastor with her husband, the Reverend Shelby Walker, in Indianapolis, Indiana. And the name of their new church start is Before the Club, or BTC Ministries. Before bringing her on, we would ask that you do a watch party where you are and invite others to join you in tonight's broadcast. That you would also feel free to make comments in the chat room, as well as ask your questions in the chat room. And so now, ladies and gentlemen, friends and foes, saints and ain'ts, we welcome to the screen the Reverend Dr. Crystal D. Walker, author of Silence is No Longer an Option, a pastoral response to domestic violence. Good evening. How are you, Reverend Dr. Crystal Denise Walker?
Well, I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing incredibly well. I do want to pause here parenthetically for our Lansing listeners and acknowledge the death of one of our community, powerful community representatives, the late Reverend, well, she's not a Reverend, the late Dr. Eva Evans. And we express our condolences to Pastor Lila Martin of Trinity AME Church, where Dr. Evans was an upstanding member of many years of that congregation. So yes, I am doing wonderfully well, for the exception of that piece of sadness that is in my heart. Right. And we're so prone to say that people have gone, our friends, our loved ones have gone to a better place. Well, in this case, I would much rather that her better place is here than there, but it is what it is. And so I say, thank you, God, that we had her as long as we did. So when we left 2 weeks ago, and I also want to park again parenthetically to thank those of you who joined us at the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries last Thursday, that you registered and joined us. Our administrator won first prize in the number of people that elected her presentation as among the best. And it was a prayer. I mean, Pastor Sue just prayed us right on up to glory and back down to the earth and right on back up to glory. I'm telling you. So we do want to thank you on behalf of Bishop Yvette A. Flunder, the founder and prelate of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, for joining us. And we pray that you had a marvelous time. And we did get your message, Dr. Crystal, that you were unable to attend this time because of your working schedule. But we do thank you for that. So when we left off 2 weeks ago, we left off at the third uh, persons or category of persons that are listed among those who practice domestic violence. We remember that the first are the police officers, and
Right.
our number one for domestic violence, and the second one we remember what was physicians, which
Correct.
was really, which is still really somewhat of a surprise for me. And then the third one, of course, are theologians or pastors or faith-based leaders, and that's where we kind of left off. Because I wanted to remember to ask you this time to give somewhat of an explanation, where you write in chapter 1, ministry focus, as an only child and one that was rejected by the outside world. I wanted to ask you to give some, to expand a little bit on just that sentence in terms of being rejected by the world, and in what way.
Okay, so I started off, let's start off when I was 4 years old. I was 4 years old. My mother taught me to read. I didn't do reading by phonics. I did sight reading. I still do sight reading. It's one of my handicaps is that I can't do reading by phonics. So I was pretty darn smart going into kindergarten, knowing how to read. Um, However, people used to bully me on the way to school and all the way back. It was three
Because you
block
could
walk.
read.
Yes, yes,
That's that's
and yeah, and so from all the way through high school, I was bullied. I was not accepted. I was called ugly. I was called stinky. I was just called any name in a book. And so I had very few friends. Um, and I didn't have any brothers or sisters, of course, who were friends. And I had very few cousins. I would visit them in the summertime. So that was my good times. But until I got into college, did I even have a halfway decent sense of self and self worth and so forth. So that rejection was just ongoing for 12 years, and children are cruel, as we know.
it seems as though that children, even though we are not born cruel, that by that early age they have learned to be cruel from somewhere.
They have.
Or is
There
it
was
just a part,
just
or is it just a part of our unredemptive nature?
I don't know. I think it's a lot of it's learned behavior. So, a good part of why I think domestic violence is accepted and acceptable, and I tell this story all the time when children are on the playground, say parents are taking them on a play date to the playground, and little Johnny hits little Susie, and then little Susie comes crying back to her mommy. She's like, "Oh, he's only hitting you because he likes you."
Oh, that's crazy. That is bad
It's
advice.
Yeah. So you start off at 4 or 5 years old
Yes.
thinking, oh, okay, if somebody's hitting me, that's because they like me. And I mean, it just goes on and it perpetuates. And if that same child sees daddy hitting mommy or, however it may go with their whatever relationship, then they're still thinking that that's okay because they're doing it because they love us. And honestly, I think the same way about spankings. I mean, I got spankings as a kid. And then your parents will tell you, I'm only doing this because I love you.
Yes, yes. Or this is going to hurt me more than it hurts
What
you.
hurt you?
I tell you, but I still say that our parents, God rest my parents' souls, I still say that our parents did what they knew to do,
Exactly.
and that they were incredible parents, and
Hmm.
I really have no complaints about my parents, even though I saw then and I see now as whippings as abuse. and this whole business of theologians, of faith-based leaders and preachers and pastors having the nerve to preach from the pulpit, to spare the rod is to
And
spoil the
spoil the
child,
child.
and haven't done any research on why that was written. If that community suffered from domestic violence, or as I used to say, as I was growing up after my fourth or fifth whipping, I said, you know what? I can wait until I'm 21. I don't need any more of this abuse, just because there's been a misunderstanding. And 9 times out of 10, it was a misunderstanding, but we were not permitted to have conversation. If we tried to have conversation, that was talking back. So there,
Right.
there was a whole lot of what shall we call it? There was a whole lot of urban legends, shall we call it? There was a whole lot of,
I think are embedded beliefs.
and what
I
kind
would
of
even go embedded beliefs.
embedded beliefs that,
Mhm.
for the most part, came from the pulpit. I just do
Absolutely.
not believe that my grandparents taught my parents to be abusive. My grandparents, my on my father's side, was a slave. And so we know where this whole thing of beating slaves until they bled, until they submitted, came from. And then that was passed down generation to generation. And then the pulpits passed it down generation to generation.
Hmm.
And it all started on the plantation. So here you are becoming an adult, having learned from your childhood that, oh, they're doing that because they like you or because they love you. Oh,
Right.
I'm punishing you, I'm disciplining you because I love you, into adulthood. And I have discovered that people can smell, what's the word that I'm looking for?
Vulnerability.
People can smell vulnerability.
Hmm.
And before you know it, here you are in a series of marriages
Hmm.
being abused, one husband after another husband after another husband. And at what point did it occur to you, no, you don't love me? No, no, this is not love. And if it is, it's not the brand of love I'm interested in. So,
Well,
so
there was this really great counselor, and she was at a domestic abuse agency in Illinois when I was living in West Chicago, and she was Aurora area, somewhere around there. And so I went to her and I was like, I don't understand. I said, I do everything for this particular husband. I said, you know, I cook for him, I clean for him, have sex with him when he wants, everything, pay bills, everything. And he fools around and then he's abusive to me. And I don't understand that. She said, well, let me tell you something. She said, if you come and cook for me and clean for me and have sex for me anytime you want and pay the bill, she says, I'll marry you.
yeah,
so so I thought about that. I was like, well, okay, okay. Yeah,
was
I'm,
it a
I'm
wake
the
up
I'm the
call?
idiot. That was a wake up call. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I'm the crazy one here.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
How did you, and let me also share with the listening audience, and thank you also to the viewers and the listeners. Thank you for being here. But uh, and to also share with you that we are going to continue this conversation the first Thursday in October, where we will have women and men who have survived domestic violence, and we will also have Dr. Crystal back for that program. But in the meantime, back at the ranch, when you got that wake up call,
Mhm.
How long from the wake up call uh, did you, from the wake up call, what did you start doing to ease yourself out of the situation? Because it couldn't have been suddenly. I mean, because
Correct.
it would have, uh, well, it would have put your life in danger.
Absolutely. And that's, I'm glad you brought that up because what I did was, with the help of the counselor, I developed a safety plan. And there was a good long portion of the safety plan that I had to develop.
So he
Um,
had no problem with you going to a counselor.
no, well, he didn't really know because, I mean, he was busy with many other women to figure
I
out what I was
see.
doing here and there. Yeah, yeah.
I see. But he
I
wasn't
was
married. He was only married to you, but he had other women.
correct.
Okay.
I even had and I know your age, so I'm not saying anything about your age because we're just a little bit
Okay.
difference in age, but I'm saying that he had older women that would call me and say, "Oh, I didn't know he was married."
Really?
Yeah, yeah, he'd be going out
But
with
he didn't
people
beat
warming
them.
up to be his mother.
But he didn't beat them.
No, no,
He saved that for you.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, what I did was, and what I suggest that anyone that's in a abusive relationship do is to go to their local domestic violence agency and or shelter and get counseling from them because she taught me how to make a safety plan, and part of the safety plan was to figure out how to get my documents out of the house, how to file for a divorce, and he never knew. I mean, I divorced him, he never knew it. I went to court, he didn't know that that was happening. And so I did all of that. And then when he was at work one night, I had my father and friends and children come up there. We packed all of my stuff and we moved out of the house in the middle of the night. Now, come to find out that one of his girlfriends was someone that lived right across the street. And she called him to tell him, that things were being packed up and so forth. So he called hundreds of times, hundreds. Um, and Unfortunately, it takes an average of 7 times to leave an abusive relationship. And believe it or not, after all of that packing, after all of that pre-planning and so forth, I went back. I didn't go. I didn't go back to him. He ended up coming uh, to me where I lived at because I moved back to Ohio, and I had to, after the abuse started again, I had to do the same kind of thing as just get all of that together, move out. One of the worst things that people in a relationship will find is the protective order, which is just a piece of paper um, that absolutely does nothing. So first of all, it took me forever to get a protective order. I mean, I was standing up there screaming and hollering and crying because I couldn't get one because he was a over the road truck driver then, and they were like, "Well, they can't find him." I was like, "You can find him. Just call his call his office."
Call his
Um,
place of employment.
yeah, they know exactly where he is 24 hours a day. And they
Okay.
said, well, they're not going to deliver that protective order to him because, he'd be out of state or so forth. I said, oh, so I should wait until he gets back in state and kills me, and then I can get that protective. I mean,
Yes.
it was a mess.
And so very
So,
often that's what happens.
mhm. And then even after that, even after I got the protective order, he came and totally trashed the house. And they did nothing about it because they said that as long as his stuff was in there, it was partially his house. He could
Okay.
do what he wanted to. So there's lots of things that really need to be changed in the legal system. And it's just overlooked. Even when I have the police help with the domestic violence training, they have a different lens of looking at it because they don't understand the Stockholm syndrome of the women that are and or men that are inside of the situation. They don't understand what's going on and how, when they come over there, maybe it's, kind of completed that cycle and it's in the honeymoon phase. But
Mm-hmm.
the person that's being abused doesn't want the abuser removed from the property. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, and I don't want to put your business out on Front Street, but
Oh,
I
I wrote
do.
it about it in a book.
Well, but one of the things that I observed in writing in reading your information is that you married uh 5 men who were abusive,
Correct.
and it was only the fifth time that you kind of started getting the message, and you even went back to him. It does it become addictive? Is it the sweet words that you hear after going through all of that to be set free? The moving and the packing up, the moving and engaging your family's help. After doing all of that, and you still went back, what was the draw? Was it the words? Was it this internal belief that maybe, just maybe, my lion eyes are not seeing the truth?
That is exactly, I mean, you just hit the nail right on the head right there.
Okay.
Because when you're courting, when you're in the initial phases of the relationship, it is probably the best relationships you can ever be in. They're
Okay.
very attentive, know what to say, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, and I think I touched on this last time, the reason that I finally got out of it is because I researched it. I researched it and I researched it and I researched it. And there was the book that was by a man that was talking about all of these things that abusive men do. And I was like, well, well, there you go. I was like, oh my gosh,
See,
I'm in this. I'm in this. I don't believe it because um, they're going to tell you that they're not abusive. The abuser will tell the man or woman that he or she is not abusive.
okay,
Um, and so then you start to believe, well, maybe I'm over thinking this, or maybe, I shouldn't be feeling this. This person really is a good person, and or I wouldn't have ever um, fell in love with that person. So
sure.
you start to really rethink your truth, the truth that you're living in. Huh?
Yes, yes.
Because you don't want to believe that, hey, I'm that dumb,
Right.
or I'm that susceptible, or I'm that vulnerable.
Sure, sure.
And then what is wrong with me? What am I doing to contribute? In fact, there's a group on Facebook that's called Wife Talk. And one time when I was talking about the abusive situation that I was in, it was like, well, what are you doing? And that's one of the biggest questions, is to re-victimize the victim. What are you doing to contribute to the abuse that you're getting?
When in fact you are not contributing anything, it's really on the abuser. Uh,
Absolutely.
so did you develop along the way? Did you develop along the way a complex, any low self esteem because of the way you were bullied, and the things that your parents said when they were disciplining you, and things that preachers said over the pulpit? Did you develop any sense of low self esteem or unworthiness or
I, Yeah, absolutely developed a sense of low self-esteem. I can't say that it was from my parents at all. My parents were very, very instrumental in me going for whatever I needed, very supportive. And so it wasn't from them. And that's, the first marriage, which lasted a total of 3 months, because I was like, well, wait a minute, nobody ever hit me before like that. You
right?
must be out of your mind. My dad didn't do that. I mean, I got spankings, but I wasn't punched in the face.
Okay.
So I was like, this is crazy. So my parents were the ones that bought me back, because he was military and we were stationed at Nellis in Vegas.
Mhm.
Um, so it wasn't that, but my sense of low self esteem absolutely came from all of the years that I was in school, um, and then ending up pregnant, while at my senior year in high school. So that was, it was just like, oh my gosh. And then, part of the phases that, now this is something I can say that was probably one of those phases that was brought down generation to generation. As you made your bed, you lie in it.
Mm.
um, and that, that keeps a lot of people in abusive relationships as well. You made your bed, you lie in it. Wedding vows are for life unless somebody cheats on you. So what I had to come to a theological understanding is that God spoke about breaking the vows of marriage. It doesn't necessarily mean, when he was talking to Hosea, it doesn't necessarily mean that Israel was sleeping around on God. Israel was breaking covenants. God said that, if you do this, I'll do this for you. And they were breaking the covenant of the marriage that they have with God. And that's what happens in abusive relationships, is that the covenant is broken.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
when that's broken, then, yes, get out. God didn't mean when he said, this marriage is until death do you part, until your partner kills you. That's not what God means.
I hear
And
that.
God doesn't mean that he kills, that your partner kills you through just murdering you, but also means killing your spirit. And so when your spirit is dying, you need to remove yourself from the toxicity of that relationship.
And for people who cannot do it for whatever reasons, and we'll talk more about this more expansively about this in October. But for people who cannot remove themselves, maybe they have a house full of children, and they don't want to leave their children, and they don't have the resources to take their children with them, or maybe that's the best example that I can think of. Uh, are there online would you recommend online sources of inspiration for them to maintain a sense of life and a sense of appreciation for themselves and you know what would you recommend in this age of media, social media? Are you aware of online programs like Wife Talk, Wife Chat, that you could share with the viewing and the listening audience, and not just Wife Chat, but men who are being abused by their partners,
Mhm.
by their wives, by their lovers, um, uh, and sometimes it's so severe that that they won't let you out of their sight.
Right.
Uh, so what does a person in that situation, what can they find on social media to encourage themselves, to keep themselves selves lifted up? Music that they can listen to, meditations that they can practice. To prepare themselves. And I do believe that people can prepare themselves for whatever abuse remains until that voice speaks to them that spoke to you and said, live or die. If I'm going to die, I might as well die getting my freedom.
Correct.
Okay.
And when you said that, it just reminded me of Harriet Tubman, and she was talking about that famous quote of hers where she said she freed this many amount of slaves, and she could have freed more had they realized that they were slaves.
Yes, yes, yes.
What a good portion of it, and why I encourage and or push and lament over pastors teaching this, is that people don't know that they're bound. they don't they don't understand that they are enslaved by this domestic violence. And when you're talking about abusers, and especially in this day of age, it's dangerous to go online and look up information that might a set them free or help them in any way, because part of a really good abuser nowadays is to track your every move. You said it. They track your move through your phone conversations, through your where you're visiting on the internet. It is extremely dangerous. So if there's a person, I had a person when I was living in Vegas, and we were staying in mobile homes, and it was a community off of the base a little bit. And so next door to the laundry area was a lady who actually was from Ohio, from Fairborn, Ohio, where Wright Patterson Air Force Base is. And her husband was in the military, and she was there. And so I would go wash clothes, and my face was always, pretty
Mm-hmm.
messed up. And she said, "We hear the arguments over there. He's going to kill you one day." I said, "Oh, he's not that bad." As I'm sitting here with a black eye like this. Um, but what she was the person that actually got me out of this at one point. Because what I told her, I said, well, what he does is it depends on what he drinks. If he's drinking hard liquor, it's a worse beating. If he's drinking, beer, it's okay. I said, but if you don't see me, then he's probably killed me. So she didn't see me for a few days, and I would, constantly do laundry. Um, what what she did was she called the police, but when the police came over there, I told I told them, because he hadn't did anything that day. I said he's not done anything, and she was like, "Oh, oh, oh, oh." They were like, "Oh, okay." They said, "But we can see, we can see what he's doing, and he's going to kill you if you don't get any help." And I was like, "Oh no, it's not that bad." And they're like, "Okay, we don't want to have to come back here, when you're dead." Um, and they came back the next week because of the noise and everything, and then they took him away, but they could only keep him for the weekend. But however, what I'm just saying is that um, you need to have someone that you can talk to, that you're absolutely honest with about what's going on, and even though you may not want to hear their advice, because unfortunately a lot of women give bad advice. If it were me, I wouldn't ever have gotten caught in this situation. What are you doing to make this happen? Lots of bad advice like that. So you need somebody that you can talk to openly and honestly, that's going to give you some good advice and just have your back and be there in case you decide to make that break. Because most women and men who are killed in domestic violence situations are killed when they leave the relationship. That just happened here in Indianapolis this week, as a matter of fact. The man came in, busted in his ex girlfriend's house, shot her 6 times while she was holding her 4-year-old daughter.
Killed the 4-year-old daughter.
No, killed the woman while she was holding her 4-year-old daughter.
Well, perhaps we can get in October when we come back. Perhaps we can get a psychologist or a on the line with us who can help us understand that kind of mentality. I mean, and I don't even want to go there tonight because we don't have an expert voice that can respond to. I think that's called passion killing, but I'm grateful that you survived. I'm grateful that you got out of it. And when we come back from our station identification break, let's go into the conversation as to how you think we can help people, and particularly faith-based leaders, uh, pastors, preachers, priests, imams, rabbis, um, deacons, the whole bishops, the whole string of faith based leaders, how we can reach uh, them in terms of what they preach. And I know that most of us are not interested in anybody telling us what to preach. I understand that. But this is of such a nature that there must be a way to penetrate this wall of defense behind which they stand. So, ladies and gentlemen, guests and friends, we're going to pause for identification to bring some announcements to you. And the first announcement that we're going to bring is that our next week we will be starting a master class on the law of attraction, the basics on the law of attraction with Chaplain Maureen Burns. Chaplain Burns is a member of City of Refuge in Oakland, not Oakland. City of Refuge is in the Bay Area. Is it Oakland, Pastor Sue? I believe it is Oakland, California. And living, check this out, Chaplain Burns, it was her lifelong dream to become a chaplain. She is a veteran, and last year at our convocation, at our Fellowship of Affirming Ministries convocation, she was elevated to chaplain by Bishop Yvette Flunder, the founder of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries and our prelate. And later on last year, she expressed her desire to live in Maui, Hawaii. And lo and behold, over the holidays of 2019, she moved to Maui, Hawaii. She will be our guest next week, starting next week, on the basics of the law of attraction. We certainly appreciate your being on board with us tonight and next week and in the past and in the future. We also want to give a shout out to our administrators program, live stream and Zoom video conference back in support. And if you have a program that you would like to contract with Cara Solutions, she is the one. You can see by this program some of her incredible work. And I think it's okay with Dr. Crystal that she has become a customer of Pastor Sue and Kyra Solutions. And hey, I'm willing to drum up all of the business for Pastor Sue that I can, because this is part of her ministry. She is a student, and she is a pastor, and she is the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries national youth minister. So she's got her hands in a few things, but this is the one thing that pays the bills. So by all means, please consider her as one of your consultants for online programming, for developing websites. Go to her website and check out some of her products. And there's her website, www.carasolutions.com. And she told me once what Cara meant, but I'm in my 7th decade now, so it slipped my mind, but we'll get that information from her so that you'll know why she named her organization Cara. And we also want to, again, invite you to purchase the book from Reverend Dr. Crystal, Silence is No Longer an Option. And I think we have the email address where you can order the book directly from Dr. Crystal, and we will certainly get that up before the end of the show. And we would also like to put a shout out for Reverend Dr. Vanessa Brown, Reverend Dr. Vanessa M. Brown. That is our Pastor Sue's pastor. She is also Bishop elect and will be elevated to bishop without the elect, probably at our convocation in Atlanta, Georgia in 2021. And the name of Bishop elect Vanessa N. Brown's church is Rivers of Living Water United Church of Christ, and she has a congregation in New York and in New Jersey. And I'm telling you, they are off the chain. Talking about worshiping God in freedom, talk about extending good news and redemption and salvation to everybody. We practice in the fellowship of affirming ministries. We practice what Bishop Flunder has taught us, and that is radical inclusivity, radical love, and radical Jesus. And so in this movement, in this radical inclusive movement, we do not discriminate against anyone. We love everybody God loves, and God loves everybody. We welcome everybody that God welcomes, and God welcomes everybody. God has no stepchildren. God has no half children. God has disobedient children, which includes all of us, but still, God loves us. So we ask you, if you're in the New York, New Jersey area, to check out Rivers of Living Water. If you're in the Bay Area, check out the fellowship, check out the City of Refuge. And if you are anywhere else in between, try to find a fellowship church. A fellowship church, and you will know that it is of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. When you walk in the door, you will be welcomed. And if you are not welcomed when you walk in the door, you are not at the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries church. All right, now let's get back to Reverend Dr. Crystal Walker. What can we do? And when I say we, I am speaking to the audience that sits in these congregations Sunday after Sunday, after Sunday, after Sunday, after Sunday, after Sunday, and hear how ministers are berating the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender community, and calling the LGBTQ community abominators and abominations in the sight of God, and telling these women, you got to obey your husband. That is the word of God, and eliminating, not talking about husbands loving your wives as Christ loves the church, and berating the poor, using that scripture, the poor will be with us always, and then going home and beating up their own spouse. Mm-hmm. We've got to find a way. God, show us a way to penetrate that wall of false preaching. I'm just going to put it there the way I see it. You are a false prophet. You are a false preacher. You are not of God. I so declare you are not of God. If those are the messages, those hate messages that you are, that's just hate. Mm-hmm. That you are preaching. You're no better than Mr. Graham. You're no better than Donald Trump. You're no better than
the Sadducees and the Pharisees.
The Sadducees and the Pharisees of old. You are one of a kind if that's what you're preaching. And I don't care if you're mad with me, because I ain't got no heaven or hell to send you to. The worst that I can experience is that you won't listen to my show. Uh, and I hope that you won't go that far. But the point that I'm making is God is love and love is God. And
Mhm.
anything outside of love is not of God. So I'm not really passing any judgment on anybody. I'm speaking about the love of God. There are enough scriptures in Holy Writ that talks about grace and talks about mercy and talks about understanding and talks about the fruit of the spirit and talks about community and talks about what Jesus did,
Right.
not to ever touch those scriptures.
Mhm.
Because if we taught people how to love themselves, I think, look at Joel Osteen. I'm not giving him a shout out. I'm just talking about the 25, 30,000 people's lives that he touches every day. The millions of people that he reaches on the radio, Sirius XM, that he reaches on his television show, they just flock to that church, not just because he's a prosperity preacher, but because he teaches people about the love of God, and
Absolutely.
he invites people at the end of his show. He says at the end of every broadcast, at the end of every television program, we want to invite you to accept Jesus Christ in your heart. And if you have done that, you have been born again. Now find a church that supports that kind of love. How
Right.
can we get our how can we get the third slew of category of people who practice domestic violence? How can we get them to do the same? Or are they beyond redemption?
No, no one's beyond redemption. I
Amen.
mean, if we were beyond redemption, Christ wouldn't have to come.
You're right.
So there is nothing that's beyond redemption. There's nothing that's beyond changing. We have to step outside um, of the box of the embedded theology that we've been drummed down our throats. In fact, um, when I went to a church in Louisville, and I have to give a shout out to Reverend Reverend Dr. Charles Elliott, the Reverend Dr. Charles Elliott Jr. I have to give a shout out to him. He was the very first church that I went to that taught the love of Christ, and I was I want to say in my 30s at that point. Um, very first church, so I was being opened up and groomed then. Um, we have to get past the judgmental part in ministry because, as you said earlier, we don't have a heaven or hell to send anybody to.
Correct.
That's God. And so when we can get into ourselves and learn to love ourselves and to accept ourselves, first of all, because that's what brought me out of this whole cycle of abuses is to love and accept myself, then we can teach others. But until we have that, we can't teach others. That, I believe, is what's happening with a good amount of ministry today, ministers, the rabbis, priests, imams, et cetera, et cetera. That's what's happening is although they've been taught to love Christ or to love God or to love, the supreme being that they're worshiping, they've not been taught self love. And until they can see themselves through God's eyes and see others through God's eyes, they won't be able to teach that. So a lot of the pushback that I believe that comes from um, just domestic violence ministry, and that's a lot of what I do. A lot of the pushback that comes from that is because there's no self love, and so there's no accepting of self. There's no accepting of others as God accepts us. So we're stuck into this box of how we should act. We should obey our husbands. You know, not speak out, do all of this, and I'm talking, I'm just using from my standpoint of obeying my husband. I'm not talking about anybody that's in the same gender loving relationship or any male that's being abused as well. I'm just talking from my experience. So um, until we can get to that point of actually learning to love self as and see self as God sees us, then we're never going to get out of this cycle of abuse, and we're going to continue to teach it, and it'll go generation to generation. It's not a generational curse. It's a something that's taught, and it's taught well. It's better than almost any education that we get in school.
Mm.
Um, so we have to encourage others and not be silent, because again, part of the silence is what's really deafening. um, it's the silence, and it's the pushing back of the issue. I believe I mentioned this before, but there's always some issue that seems to be more important than domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we're talking about COVID. We're talking about Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about inclusivity. So we're talking about all of these issues, and then domestic violence keeps getting pushed under the rug because it seems like it's just a fight between two grown adults, and it's not. It's a
Mm-hmm.
mindset. It's so much more than a fight between two adults. And it doesn't need to be pushed any longer. It needs to be spoken up, and people need to feel free. Yes, some lives are going to be lost. Some lives were lost during the civil rights movement. Lives are being lost now because of Black Lives Matter. There's lives being lost because of COVID. There's going to be lives lost, but there's going to be so many more lives that are saved because we've had the courage to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, people are looking at me now. They're like, a pastor that's been married 5 times, there's something wrong with her. No,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing wrong with me. There's
Mm-hmm.
something wrong with the mindset that I had. There was something wrong with me thinking, one, that I had to be married, in order to be happy, or it was okay to let these people abuse me physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and so forth. That was what was wrong with me. But what was right was when I said no more, and I just don't feel that this is what God would have me to do,
Mm-hmm.
and left.
So, how do we address the person who has been taught, don't question God, which is interpreted, don't ask God any questions, because God is the one person that can help us mature to a point where we can make plans of escaping, where we can find out how do I love myself, without with how can I, because we've got this enemy. Bishop Tawana was talking about that today on her 2 o'clock Thursday afternoon show, that will start also sharing as an announcement. She was saying that today that the enemy is enemy, and that's called pride and ego.
Mm-hmm.
It is that pride and that ego that makes us feel separate from other people and denies us uh, a sense of oneness with God and one another. And we need that sense of oneness. We have to silence that ego. We've got to get rid of that pride in order to learn how to love ourselves in a non prideful, egotistical way. And so that's something that I'd like for us to take a shot at just for a couple of minutes, because believe it or not, we only have 5 more.
And there we go.
Um,
Well, yeah. So we, I think a lot of the pride that we have is a way to hide inside of ourselves. Um, and it's a way to keep people out of the real of ourselves. And so self worth is actually accepting yourself as being worthy of God, and to accept yourself as being worthy of being who you are, and to be truly authentic to what you are. And until you are truly authentic to what you are, and not what the world believes you should be, and not what pastor believes you should be, and not what your mom and dad believe you should be, or whatever, and until you're okay with yourself and you're able to tell your story, it's great. Now I'm going to just end with this. One of my very very favorite movies is 8 Mile, and it's the movie of Eminem's life. And the reason I love it is because of the very end. So at the very end, they're doing this battle. Eminem's on one side of the battle, and this other guy's on the other. And the guy was like, getting ready to talk to him. And Eminem started talking, and he talked about himself. He says, "Yeah, my mama's a trailer trash person, and she slept with my best friend, or slept with one of my schoolmates, and then one of my best friends slept with my girl, and I got a job down here, or whatever, and not making any money." He said, "Yeah." He said, "Now what you got for me?" He told his own story.
I
and
see.
the and the guy did not have anything. The guy lost the battle because the battle was all about telling Eminem's story,
Yes.
from a negative point of view. But
Yes.
Eminem told his own story, and so
Yes.
he gained the empowerment,
Yes.
and that's what we need to do.
And you're correct. That is a beautiful, beautiful story, a beautiful way of ending this time with Reverend Dr. Crystal Walker, the author of the acclaimed, soon to be acclaimed, Silence is No Longer an Option, a pastoral response to domestic violence. Pastor Crystal, I'm going to ask you if you will please put us on your calendar the first Thursday in October when we will get back with you to join us. And I'm asking each of you that are listening and watching if you would join us next week when we will bring on Chaplain Maureen Burns from Maui, Hawaii, to give us the basics on in the master class titled Law of Attraction. We want to thank you, the listeners and the viewers, for being with us tonight. We appreciate your support, your presence. We appreciate you being with us and sending us your questions, letting us know that you are online. We want to thank our administrator, Pastor Sue, the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries National Youth Minister, founded by my pastor and our prelate, the Honorable Reverend Dr. Bishop Yvette A. Flunder, also founder of City of Refuge in Oakland, California. Again, we want to send out a shout for Pastor Sue's pastor, the Reverend Dr. and Bishop elect Vanessa N. Brown, Rivers of Living Water, United Church of Christ, New York and New Jersey. We send our condolences to the Trinity AME Church Lansing and the Reverend Lila Martin upon the death of Dr. Eva Evans. And we want to ask of you three more things: that you join the Lansing NAACP or your local NAACP chapter in your area. Number two, we ask you to register to educate yourself about the candidates and plan to vote. And number three, we would ask that you would not only pray for Space for Grace Without Walls United Church of Christ, but that you would send us a financial contribution at hashtag Space for Grace MI, hashtag Space for Grace Michigan. We would appreciate your support, and it will become quite evident in the very near future as to why we are asking for your support. And we want to leave you with these words: First of all, we want to show you one of our banners from Peanuts, because I think it's a wonderful thing for two people to share with one another. If you ask me how long I'll be your friend, my answer will be, I don't know, because I really don't know which one is longer, forever or always. Until next week, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And Philippians, the writer of Philippians, the 4th chapter and the 8th verse, tells us this because in Proverbs it is written, as a person thinks, so is that person. Because your thoughts become words, your words become action, and your action takes you to your destiny. God bless you. We love you, and we are praying for you. Good night.